What is going on? Greetings, members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. All of you imagination connoisseurs. Once again, welcome to Robservations, the show about something. This is Robservations episode number 283. And I am the Viceroy of Verisimilitude, the master of fun and wonder, and the existential Mr. Rogers. I don't even know what that means, but you know what? I'll take it. Robert Meyer Burnett, and it's great to have you here on a Monday. As you all know, it's Thanksgiving week. Some people think it's the vestiges of. You know what? I'm not even gonna comment. I like Thanksgiving. I know we have questionable things, whatever. I like the idea of getting together with family and fellowship, and however it started, it's mutated into something that I enjoy. And I think that we should reclaim the holiday as being a time when we get together and we really think back and wonder or remember what we're thankful for. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this episode. First of all, remember, these episodes are brought to you by Lucky Tiger, men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And as you know, if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you buy anything, and when you check out, you punch in PGS for Post-Geek Singularity Community. It's just PGS, Post-Geek Singularity Community, I add. But if you punch in PGS, you get 20% off your order. And as you know, we are giving away a bottle of Lucky Tiger all over body wash, head to tail body wash, as they call it. We've given another one away, but I don't know who won. I've got to find that out probably tomorrow. But somebody else won. We have our second bottle has been given away. We're giving one a week away until Christmas. So all you have to do to get one is to go to our website, the Burnettwork, theburnettwork.net. Just comment on anything. Just comment on anything, and you are entered into a random drawing to get a bottle of Lucky Tiger head to tail body wash. By the way, the 3-word reviews, burning it up, man. Burning up the charts. People love those 3-word reviews. And by the way, if you don't see a movie that's already been listed, send us your own 3-word review on the Burnettwork.net website. That is the Burnettwork.net. Because eventually, I want every single movie ever made to have a 3-word review on the website. I think I've never sent one in. I think I'm going to have to put my own 3-word review about Tough Turf, probably. Either Tough Turf or Star Crash. There's some movies that, like Wild Wild Planet, you don't even need to give a review. You just have to restate the title, Wild Wild Planet. I was talking about that movie. A viewer asked this morning on the John Campea show if I could remake any movie using modern technology. I said 1965's Wild Wild Planet would be my choice. If you guys have never heard of Wild Wild Planet, and why would you? Please, well, maybe not right this second, but don't walk. Run over to YouTube, punch in Wild Wild Planet trailer, and prepare to smile. And if you can't understand why I wouldn't want that movie to be remade, why I wouldn't want to remake that movie, I don't know what to tell you, because damn, just watch it. Just watch the trailer for Wild Wild Planet. So, you know, sometimes, you guys, it's hard for me to come up with what it is I'm going to talk about on the show. Like, what's the topic? I think my format is a topic and then letters. And sometimes I don't necessarily have a topic, but I was thinking, I'll flat out admit I screwed up. I screwed up. I jumped the gun. I made a mistake, and I realized that sometimes I can be a dick. Who would have thought? But I did something. And worse yet, sometimes I actively want to be a dick. And I thought about it, and I'm like, that isn't right. Here I'm supposed to be the master of fun and wonder, and yet, and I'll tell you what I did. And by the way, in being a dick, I made a mistake. I betrayed my own ethos to do research and to understand. And I just thought, aren't I so cool? Well, I think I proved publicly, I shamed myself. I tried to be a dick. It backfired on me. I got called on it on Twitter, and I'm going to tell you folks what I did. So it's no secret to anybody that Watchmen is one of my favorite comics in the world. I've like read Watchmen 30, 40, 50 times since it came out. And I've been watching Damon Lindelof's Watchmen series every week with a very critical eye. And I objected to it. I objected to Doomsday Clock. I objected to Before Watchmen. I've objected to anything that Alan Moore has not been involved with. I actually was on board with Zack Snyder's Watchmen, and I'm very conflicted about that movie. There's things about it I love. I love seeing the comic book brought to life, but on the other hand, I don't think it's a very good adaptation. So, and I'm going to say that Damon Lindelof is somebody that I hate watched The Leftovers, even though it was based on a book. Lost, I think the final season of Lost is one of the greatest audience betrayals in entertainment history. And of course, watching my good friend Charlie de Lauzirika's documentary on the Prometheus Blu-ray made me really dislike Damon Lindelof even more. I've watched a few interviews with him recently. I've talked about them on the show when he talked about the fact that when TV writers get together these days, they like to outwoke each other. So anyway, I've been watching Watchmen, and I realized, against my better judgment, I went into that show primed to hate it. Primed to hate it. I wanted to hate Watchmen, and I've been looking, rather than allow it to flow over me, I've gone in with my nose high in the air, like, show me what's going, prove to me that, anyway, So last night, which was, of course, the 6th episode of 9. By the way, I'm not going to spoil Watchmen right now. You don't have to tune out. I'm not going to spoil it. So I went in wanting Prime because I knew what was coming. I'd figured out where the show was going to go and what they were going to do. And so this revelation that, by the way, everyone knew it was coming. They made this revelation. It's a big revelation, especially if you're a Watchmen fan. Speculative, and I still don't quite know how I feel about it because it didn't come from the creator of the series himself. But the 6th episode of Watchmen is an extraordinary hour of TV. No matter how you look at it, it's an extraordinary hour of TV. And even I have to give credit where credit is due. The last 3 episodes of Watchmen, I don't know yet whether I'm going to love the whole series, whether I'm going to look back on the series and go, I love that as a Watchmen fan. But I will say this. It is some of the most interesting and compelling TV that I've seen in a long time, even though I still can't decide whether it's the most pretentious television show I've ever watched. I do think everybody involved in it was a member of the drama club when I was in high school. And the writing for the show is incredibly. There's a lot of stuff that it's like, hey, look at how clever we are. But you know what? I realized at the end of the day, what's wrong with that? I mean, the ambition, the storytelling ambition, and the conception of what that show is supposed to be, what it wants to be, is admirable. And I was watching it and thinking, rather than from this, tell me how smart you are and let me see if like I had to put away that attitude. And halfway through last night's episode, I'm like, this is pretty amazing television. Now, they made reference to something that my knee-jerk reaction was that you guys are wrong. You missed the point, blah, blah, blah. So I went and tweeted about it. I did. I tweeted about it. I said this thing. I go, in the Watchmen universe, this thing didn't exist. Well, I was quickly schooled. Like, while I've read the comic a lot, in each comic of Watchmen, each issue, there was a text sequence, a text, either a story or, well, the thing that I objected to and said, this doesn't, well, somebody immediately said, you are wrong, Rob. I think you're a cool guy, but you're wrong. and they schooled me. The thing that I was objecting to was actually in the text sequence in the first issue of the Watchmen comic, which I had forgotten about. Because to be honest, I don't always read the text at the end because it's, you know, it's text. I want to get to the meat of the comic. So I made a mistake and I was schooled. But the reason I made that mistake was I was primed to just hate something. And I watched that episode. It's very funny because I've watched that show waiting to be offended by something. Waiting because I hate watch The Leftovers. And there's a lot of good stuff in The Leftovers, but there's a lot of stuff I still was like, "Urgh." So I was and last night I found this one thing. I'm like, yeah. But watched the episode twice, back to back last night. And it's pretty compelling TV. Now, I'll have a lot more to say about it. I'll review the whole show once I've seen it. I'll get into my thoughts. There's a lot about it that I find objectionable, but there's a lot of you cannot deny the ambition, the craft, yes, the writing, the acting. It is first-rate television that I think is a little too smart for its own good, but I know here's a backhanded criticism, but it's remarkable for what it is, and it certainly is swinging for the fences. And I was just being a dick, and it was shoved in my face because I made this. Yeah, see, look at how smart. Well, you know what? The people that are working on Watchmen, I give it up because they have done their homework more than I have. You know, as a casual fan, I've been reading it since 1986. 33 years of Watchmen in my life. Well, these people, Damon Lindelof especially, who is an admitted Watchmen fanboy, the man has done his homework. And whether you like the show or not, you must recognize its ambition. Well, after all of this, after I was shown up, and even the person who even proved that I was wrong did say, Rob, you're a cool guy, but you're fucking wrong. I am all about that. Please prove me wrong. And it's not about proving me wrong, but it's about the fact that I can't know everything. I can't remember everything. But the fact is, if my opinion is demonstrably wrong about something, and you can just flat out prove it to me, I'm all for it. But then it got me thinking. It got me thinking about why normally I'm Mr. Positivity. I'm the guy that loves so many things. I'm the guy that loves Star Crash. I'm the guy that will tell you to go run, don't walk, to go watch the trailer for Wild Wild Planet, the Franco-Italian co-production from 1965. And I'll tell you, I love that shit. I love that movie. I have the Laserdisc. I have the DVD. And people are going to look at me by watching the trailer and going, well, ha, 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 that's funny, Rob. But was it good? It's fun. But what I realized is that with all of this stuff that I hold precious and dear, Star Trek or whatever, I have this sort of snooty, elitist attitude. I try and pretend I don't. But look, if something's truly terrible, like I do believe that modern Star Trek is truly terrible and has been for a decade, I have a handle on why I think Star Trek is truly terrible. And there's a lot of things that'll back me up. But I've always also said, if you have only seen Star Trek in the last 10 years, and that's your first experience, and you like it, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. And nor do I ever want to be the one that's going to try and take that joy away from you. You know, I'm the gatekeeper of verisimilitude, but I'm not the gatekeeper of your happiness. And if you like something, I'm not going to tell you shouldn't like it. I mean, I like a lot of things that people tell me that I shouldn't like. I love Life Force, especially the international version of Tobe Hooper's 1985 film Life Force, based on a novel called Space Vampires. A lot of people don't. I like it. I like the international version more. But I realized that there is a certain affliction I think we as fans have, and I think it's something that it's modern. It's a product of the modern age. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Safe, Todd Haynes' film Safe with Julianne Moore. Basically plays a woman who's allergic to the modern world. Essentially, that's basically what's going on there. I feel that modern fandom, and especially fans that have grown up being fans, and now we live in the modern age, we have a tendency to sometimes become disillusioned or embittered with the things that we are fans of and we have been fans of. In my case, it's Star Trek or Star Wars, my whole life. And then when modern iterations of it come out and they don't make us feel the way we want to feel, they don't satisfy us the way that the original stuff used to satisfy us, that we tend to get angry and reactionary, and we want to blame somebody. I'm going to blame some of the people in this room, like Vito Corleone wanted to do. And I was asking myself, well, why? I mean, we're still getting this stuff, and while there are other franchises that I've loved, I talk about the James Bond franchise, Gundam, animated Gundam, things that I've liked where we've had many different iterations of these franchises over the years. I don't get as upset with those franchises as I get upset with other franchises. Like, why am I easier on the James Bond franchise than I am on Star Trek? Well, when I was a kid, even when I'd watch an episode, there were episodes of Star Trek that I hated, even when they came on. I did not like Plato's Stepchildren. It's terrible. I did not like And the Children Shall Lead. I did not like Turnabout Intruder, although Turnabout Intruder has grown on me as I've gotten older. So there are things about Star Trek that I didn't like, and I'd be like, this episode sucked, even though I didn't use the word sucked when I was 8, but I knew it was an episode that I wasn't a fan of. However, for the most part, of the 79 original episodes of the original series that I used to watch, I liked probably 72 of them. There were episodes I liked more, but for the most part, I liked them all. Now, for James Bond movies, I pretty much liked them all too. Now, there were movies I liked better than others. And even when I was a kid watching them on TV, I knew Diamonds Are Forever wasn't great, but there's stuff in it like the moon buggy. I had a Corgi die-cast miniature of the moon buggy. So when Diamonds Are Forever was on, there were things in it that I could look forward to. I liked Jill St. John. I like the moon buggy. I like the end with the bathysphere or whatever, the little mini submarine and the battle on the oil derrick or whatever. There's stuff in there that I would look forward to, but I wasn't like, oh, that movie sucked. And I feel like the thing as I've gotten older, of course, you get more discerning, you're more learned, you understand what it is you like about things and what you don't like about things. But what I used to know about myself was I would watch anything that was science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And even when things were subpar, like, what is it, Invasion of the Star Creatures, like 2 guys in suits, I knew that movie was terrible. Or They Came from Beyond Space with the Moon Master. Like, I knew these movies were not good, but I watched them. And even though they weren't good, I still enjoyed the experience of watching these things. Now, when it came to Watchmen, I have thoroughly enjoyed watching every episode. 6 episodes, dissecting every episode. And, I haven't really had a lot to talk about yet. My friend Dave Hargrove and I haven't spoken in the past couple weeks. Not because we're at odds. I speak with Dave whenever I'm on the phone with him. We're on the phone for 3 or 4 hours discussing all these things. And after as much as I talk and all the work I have to do, speaking for 3 or 4 hours on the phone with my good buddy, and if we haven't really talked Watchmen yet because we watched Leftovers together for 3 seasons, and I know we're both going to have a lot to say about Watchmen. I know. But I realized, I was like, what am I angry about? Like, why am I angry, or why am I trying to not like a Watchmen TV show? How can I can object to what what Alan Moore is a writer, how they kept Watchmen in print, and how he's kind of been screwed over by corporate interests. I get all that. And I can talk about how certain things might not be perfect. There's Gilbert and Tallulah coming back and forth. I don't know what's up, but clearly maybe somebody dropped something off the door for me. I don't know. I'm waiting for these headphones that, of course, let me just show you again what happened to my headphones. Look at that. Gilbert took my headphones, and look at that. He took my headphones and ripped them apart. Didn't you, buddy? Still love them, though. I know, Bubbers. It's not your fault. But I've had those headphones for years, and they really worked well. And those Sony Studio headphones are great. You want a cookie? All right. See, I still love you guys, and even though you wreck my headphones, I'll give you a cookie. Because I want to bring joy to the masses, and I want to bring joy to these canines. And they deserve it. There's no reason why I should be angry with all of this stuff. It's all great. It's all luxury item. But no, it really got me thinking, the whole Watchmen thing. And I'm like, I can't be mad about all of these things. I can be mad about. Here's the thing. My big epiphany, my big realization, which shouldn't be that big of a realization, but the things that I love, especially when it comes to Star Trek and Star Wars, they were created the better part of half a century ago by people that had many different interests, that had many different economic and social realities. And the reasons that they were doing these things was different than now. And what I should really do is, now, by the way, this is not going to make me like Star Trek Discovery anymore by saying this, because I think the problem is that there's one thing, you shouldn't just accept everything that's there and be grateful for it. No, you should be discerning. You should appreciate things. If they're good, there's a reason why they're good, and you should always appreciate excellence. You should. But there is the fact that I've loved Star Trek since I was 5, and I want to say ground zero for Star Trek for me. My mom says I watched it since I was 3. I don't believe her, because knowing what I know about Star Trek, it really went into strip syndication in 1972, and that was probably the first time I could see it as a little kid, as a 5-year-old, So I can't sit there and go, well, but I've been watching Star Trek since I was 5. It's been there for my whole life. And for the most part, 40 years, whatever, for I would say a good 80% of my life, Star Trek was something that I enjoyed. Even when it wasn't great, even when I was not a fan of, I thought Voyager was a copy of a copy of a copy, but there's a lot of episodes of Voyager. I think about Blink of an Eye or Living Witness that I think are really great episodes of Star Trek and great episodes of science fiction television. And there's a lot of Voyager that I like. I talk about, Workforce Part 1 and 2, which is probably not something that people love, but I like that episode, the 2-parter. But I realized, I'm like, I am not obligated to weigh in or to watch, like Star Trek's been around for 53 years. And for the majority of Star Trek's existence, or at least 80% of Star Trek's existence, I've really liked it. I collect spaceships from it, model spaceships. I collect books from Star Trek, reference books, all weapons, all kinds of things. Star Trek has provided me joy for the majority of my life. And yet, I allow Star Trek Discovery, because it's really a terribly written show, but I allow it to get me down. Why? I still have all the great Star Trek that I've loved. I put it in. It's like visiting an old friend. No one's taken away my Star Trek from me. And, even whether a Gundam series comes out that I don't particularly like. Look, I haven't seen Iron-Blooded Orphans yet, but for the most part, I loved Gundam Unicorn. Gundam Origin's pretty badass too, even though it's retelling stories I knew, but from a different perspective. Like, why be so angry? I do watch a lot of these channels, a lot of YouTube channels that are angry about stuff. And some of them are angry, rightfully so. Like, there's a lot of talk. I've suddenly found myself being a Kathleen Kennedy defender, which I think she's deserving of respect. She has an impeccable track record, but people who don't like Star Wars under her tenure have been very vocal about it. And I I don't know Kathleen Kennedy. I'm certainly not trying to curry favor with her, but I'm like, look, man, she produced a lot of movies, and I wish I've been able to produce a movie about once every 10 years, which is still more than some, but a lot less than some others that I admire. I would like to produce more. I hope in the next 10 years I can produce 5 movies. But the I realized that I have been waiting. I've primed myself to wait for something in Watchmen to piss me off. That's weird, man. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to wait for things that piss me off. I'm watching Watchmen because I love Watchmen. So why am I watching this show hoping, why don't I let it flow over me and enjoy it for what it is? And by the way, I can't believe that they've allowed Damon Lindelof to make a sequel to the Watchmen comic book. I can't imagine that. Kudos to the HBO execs, the AT&T execs, whoever the new head honcho is at HBO, for allowing them to make a sequel to the comic book itself, because it's certainly not a sequel to the comic book, or certainly not a sequel to the movie. And by the way, even though it was out of focus in the background, seeing certain characters that belong to a certain 1940s super team, it was really fun to see them, like, they're there, man. And I last night's episode of Watchmen was extraordinary. And I realized I was loving it. And there's no reason why I should go into these things and be disillusioned. The first clip from Star Wars Rise of Skywalker was put out online today. And there's already been a lot of vitriol about that clip. Well, I watched that clip and I'm like, I really liked it. I'm like, this is cool. This feels like a scene from Star Wars. Hearing the first snippet of John Williams' score in a scene from the movie that's edited together. It was cool. I liked it. And I'm like, I've spent so much time thinking I'm going to hate Rise of Skywalker and that's going to be terrible and that I'm not going to like it. But I watched this first scene and I'm like, at least for this 90 seconds or however long the clip is, I liked it. I mean, I bought my tickets for Rise of Skywalker as soon as they went on sale, and then I'm going with Bill Hunt and his wife bought tickets to the Chinese, so I have my tickets. By the way, my tickets, pretty good seats at the Cinerama Dome for the first show at 6 o'clock on the 19th. I have those. I was just going to go trade them in, but I still have them, if anyone's interested. But anyway, I realized that why I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that person that watches something and sits there with his arms folded, waiting for whatever it is I'm watching to give me an excuse to be like, meh, meh, meh. And I felt guilty. I went, and by the way, what I did last night, I'm like, I tried to be smarter than Damon Lindelof, smarter than the writers. If I was smarter than the writers of these shows, I would have a job producing a show with HBO, and I do not. I'm an HBO approved director, though. They approved me as a director, directing 5 episodes of Femme Fatales. That was pretty cool, even though it was a late night Skinamax show. But I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to watch things waiting to dislike them, because I'm not that person. I love Wild Wild Planet, man. And a lot of people would look at it and go, Rob, your taste is questionable. I'm like, no, it's not. I saw the movie when I was younger. First time I saw it, I'd heard of it, but I'd never seen it. I bought it sight unseen on Laserdisc. Watch it. I'm like, this is a hoot. Go watch the trailer. Tell me you don't want to see that movie. 1965. The model shots in the opening of the trailer, the future city with rockets that have Ohio blue tip matches as the flame coming out. I mean, how can you not love that? Anyway, I realized that we live in this fandom renaissance where everything is available to us digitally, physically, wherever. You can get whatever you want. Hell, the Teen Titans Volume 4 Omnibus is finally dropping tomorrow, actually. You can get everything you want. It's amazing. And I don't want to be a person, I don't want to spend my life waiting for things I've loved to be bad. I tell people that I watch every episode of Star Trek, and I do. And I thought the last Short Treks episode of Star Trek was one of the single most abysmal things I'd ever seen as far as speculative science fiction or something that's supposed to be uplifting. I couldn't believe what I was watching. I really couldn't. But I wanted it to be good when it started. Anyway, I think our whole fan community is suffering from this overall malaise, this disillusionment. I think that we should get over, and we should start celebrating what it is we've all loved anyway, because we're all here because we all love the same shit. We all do. We're all excited about it, and yet there's so much online vitriol. We're screaming at each other about these things. I mean, people are yelling at me about the Snyder Cut. Like, why are you talking about the Snyder Cut? Like, the funny thing is people that don't know me, there's nobody that wants to see the Snyder Cut of Justice League more than me. But there are business realities that people aren't addressing that I was trying to address. But anyway, I just realized that my disillusionment or my desire to want to see things fail is wrong. It's not good, and it leads me to jump the gun and make rash comments on Twitter, on social media, and I got stomped on, and rightfully so. Like, Rob, you're wrong. I was wrong, flat out wrong. So I'm glad somebody taught me a lesson, by God. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. A little confessional from me today. And I've got so many letters, so many good letters I want to read. But let's see. First of all, who is here? I know people have been firing in questions and things. Let me get to those. Timbula, Tim is here. Timbula the Spider Monkey. Weekly bunts. Buy some more doggy biscuits. Well, thanks, Tim. All the way from down under. He comes from a land down under. Yes, he is a man without hats. Mattuine says, the battle of the birds, Seahawks over the Eagles. This is the way. Not a very exciting game, I have to say. But, hey, it's a victory. But the Seahawks, I mean, look, I understand the Eagles are our American. You can't not love an eagle. They're a beautiful bird. They're amazing. And the Seahawks might be a fictional bird, sort of. And they are the Jedi Knights, the Pacific Northwest. But a victory is a victory, and I will take that. James Bonner says, hey, Rob, ever heard of a series of films called Trancers from the 80s? They look cheesy but fun. What say you? Jack Death. Tim Thomerson, Jack Death. I was on the set of Trancers 2. And not only that, when we were shooting, by the way, at Union Station. Well, I wasn't. It was before I worked at Full Moon. And I actually went to the Trancers 2 wrap party, and I talked to Helen Hunt. She was delightful. No one was talking to her. I talked to her I don't remember. She was playing pool. I was playing pool. I talked to Helen Hunt. And for the guy who asked about Arcade yesterday, I have to tell you that when I was working on Arcade, we came up with 4 more Arcade outlines, and we were going to cross over Full Moon's Arcade with Trancers. And I think it was Arcade. There was Arcade 2 was Electric Nightmare. Maybe it was Arcade 3, Death to Arcade, but Death was spelled D-E-F, D-E-F, D-E-T-H, which is how Jack Death's last name was spelled. And we were going to do a Trancers Arcade crossover. I liked the first Trancers quite a bit. I remember it. I haven't seen it in ages, but I remember it being sort of a Terminator ripoff. All Full Moon movies were inspired by something else. But yeah, I mean, the Trancers films, they're not, the first one's probably the best. That was back when Charlie Band knew he was still making theatrically released motion pictures. But yeah, go Trancers. Luke Beckett says, I was about to write you a letter about this, but I'm happy you realized this on your own. Like it or not, we're still getting new Star Trek. It's true, we are. I just wish it was better. But okay. Yes. Sujit says, modern fandom needs to follow optimistic nihilism. You know what? I like that. Optimistic nihilism. That's pretty good. I think that is the way. Alexander Wilson is here. Let's see. Alexander Wilson says, watching 90s NBA and seeing, GP to Kemp make me miss the NBA in Seattle. Basketball fans are upset that basketball is not in Seattle. Your fans, you're talking about, well, Sean Kemp. You know, the Seattle Supersonics, if memory serves, they won the world championship in 78, 79. I was really into the Sonics when, like, it was Jack Sikma, Downtown Freddie Brown, Slick Watts, Lenny Wilkins was coaching. And I 90s, I didn't really follow the Seattle Supersonics, but the Seattle needs a team. The fact that we don't have, it was so weird. They sell the Supersonics to like Oklahoma or something? Like I don't even know. I mean, I'm so out of, the Lakers and certainly the Clippers and all that, but I've been so out of following basketball for so long. And I think that Seattle does need a team. And when I was a kid, I played basketball. Actually, I played basketball when I first started with Quinn Snyder, who is now the head coach of the Utah Jazz. And I played boys club basketball in elementary school and junior high. And I didn't play it as much. I was a forward, and I didn't play it as much because I wasn't as good as I didn't play. So I was more into movies and all that. So I stopped playing as I got older in junior high. I was not going to go into high school and play high school basketball. But I do think Seattle needs a team. We need the Supersonics back. And if we did get an NBA team, I think we should make them the Supersonics again, because the Seattle Supersonics is such a cool name for a basketball team. But yeah, that's funny watching NBA basketball. I'm with you. Like, why not? Shouldn't we? We should absolutely have a team. Anyway, I've got so many letters that I haven't read. This first one comes from Jeffrey Mao. It's a follow-up letter that he wrote to something a while ago. Jeff says, "Greetings, Viceroy of Verisimilitude, Master of Fun and Wonder, the notoriously sanctimonious Robert Meyer Burnett. I wanted to weigh in with the second part of my thoughts on computer-generated imaging, CGI, and its use in movie visual effects. First off, I think that no one, I or any imagination connoisseur in the Post-Geek Singularity, can claim that CGI, now synonymous with VFX, but not really, as I will explain, is bad for films, that it is detrimental to the filmmaking process or the filmmaking or film-going experience, or that we are worse off for it. Far from that, we as filmgoers and lovers and admirers of the arts and crafts of film have benefited greatly from its introduction and use in film. We've been able to see things that we only imagined in our minds that we could see. And the filmmakers have been benefited greatly from the ability to more fully realize their vision. I'm not going to even attempt to go over all the benefits of CGI and VFX. There are things that are just now being employed in large-scale production that perhaps weren't even thought of 5 or 10 years ago, such as like what Jon Favreau has been doing with his movies and now The Mandalorian. These are benefits that perhaps are not even obvious or appreciated by we the viewer, but behind the scenes adds to significant cost and time savings that indirectly benefit us in that they allow these films and shows to be able to produce content more quickly. We become used to, in fact, a bit jaded, to hearing about certain production being announced and automatically start to calculate in our minds the budget and how much will or won't be done with CGI. Even in pre-production, CGI has helped out a lot with the use or pre-visualization, computerized storyboarding that allows the filmmakers to more quickly and realistically see what the scene is going to look like. Now, it's quite obvious what are the downsides to having CGI, and we've all been victims to having to watch it. Because for as much as we have been able to see amazing things that we were never able to see before, we also see so much CGI that when we see CGI done poorly, it is just that, much more jarring and disruptive. Let's take the case of Justice League, where we had examples of 2 bad uses of CGI. There are probably more, but I'm going to mention 2. One is the infamous Henry Cavill mustache. And if we're going to start coming up with rules about when they shouldn't use CGI, I guess that would be the first rule. And that is, thou shalt not CGI human skin when it wasn't there to begin with. This is not the same as saying you can't use CGI de-aging effects because it's the same face with all the same amount of skin. You're just making the face look younger. In fact, I'm certain almost all cases of de-aging have thus far involved clean-shaven actors. No, in this case, with Justice League, due to a ridiculous contractual requirement, Henry Cavill had to keep his mustache for the Mission Impossible film and therefore for Justice League reshoots. his mustache had to be removed digitally. Also, we saw many cases of Steppenwolf and other characters not looking great at all, and this was probably due to them having to rush to finish the effects. So we have another rule here: thou shalt not rush your CGI. In fact, the mustache fiasco leads to another rule: thou shalt not use CGI because of non-artistic reasons. Really, we just have to use the Malcolm axiom with CGI, just because the Ian Malcolm axiom with CGI, just because you should or you could do something, please stop to think whether you should. Like we've kept in mind throughout, CGI is just a tool in the toolbox for the director and VFX people to use. The better you use the tool, the defter the hand, the nimbler the touch, the better. There are directors out there who clearly have a better eye for using and incorporating CGI and VFX than others. On the other hand, we have George Lucas as perhaps an example of a director who, while a visionary director, didn't quite seem to know how to best utilize technology that his own company pioneered. It's not good when many scenes in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith look less realistic than similar scenes in the Clone Wars animated series. On the contrary, we have directors such as James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, Neil Blomkamp, Guillermo del Toro, Gareth Edwards, to name several, who just seem to have an eye for how to meld visual effects, CGI, and practical footage together almost seamlessly. Sure, some works they've done are better than others, but they stand out as exemplars. In mentioning Spielberg, I'll end this letter touching on a CGI scene in a movie that he produced and was directed by Clint Eastwood, Flags of Our Fathers. The scene is when the sailors and Marines are sailing out and the camera shoots around the whole fleet going in and around the ships. It's clearly CGI, as those ships don't exist anymore and you couldn't get that many real ships together, and the camera moves in a way that can only move in CGI. I understand that Spielberg helped out Eastwood with these scenes and other more effects-heavy shots. I wonder if Spielberg was at the helm as he had originally intended to be, if the scene would have turned out differently. But it does stand out as one of those early to mid 2000s CGI shots that while they don't look bad, they also don't look great. Thanks, Jeff. Well, once again, Jeff Mao writing another great letter. Look, we've talked about CGI on the show before. See, it's hard to explain. It's hard to get into this, the nature of I mean, it's sort of a, I don't know if you'd call it an existential idea, but we all know subconsciously, whether you think about it or not, that movies are created by human beings. We all know that it's make-believe. And we all know that movies are shot by cameras. You set up cameras, you have actors on a set. We know this in the back of our minds. Now, how much we pay attention to that, well, that's something that only you can say. But what happens is with CGI, what CGI has done, I think that when we talk about bad CGI, yes, there's bad renderings, such as that one. This is the worst CGI shot of The Rock from, what is it, from The Scorpion King or one of those movies. There's bad CGI where the artisans that are creating the actual computer-generated imagery themselves are not up to the task. I thought the movie Spawn, for instance, early CGI effort back in the 90s, it did it no favors. But one of the things that I think the design of CGI is contingent upon is how you use the virtual camera. I've said this before, but once you are no longer shooting with an actual physical camera that's in a physical space with people, then what happens is you can move that. I mean, when we say virtual camera, what we're talking about is whatever you're seeing, whatever CGI imagery is being created, you're picking a lens just like you would with a physical lens. They pick lenses because the virtual camera has to match the physical camera. So you want to be able to know what the focal length, if you're shooting live action plates and say you're shooting with, I don't know, a 40 millimeter lens or a bigger lens, whatever millimeter of lens you're shooting with, you need to tell the effects guys what lens you're shooting with. Because say you're shooting live action with a 40 millimeter lens or something, and there's somebody in a room and you see something out the window that has to be CGI'd in. They need to know what lens you were shooting with So they can create the same kind of lens distortion that would be created by a 40 millimeter lens if what they're creating is, say, 35 feet away or whatever. They need to know, because they have to emulate within the CG image that they're doing, or whatever, the whether it's a set extension or something, they have to know. So there is a science with all of that that is also incorporated into computer generated imagery. It's true, which, by the way, is fascinating, because if you start thinking about philosophically what's real and what's not real, when you have a camera that isn't, there is no virtual camera, and if you're creating an element, a shot that has no, it's completely computer generated. If the virtual camera moves too fast or makes too dynamic of a move, what you're doing then is you're sort of, go with me on this. It's hard to wrap your head around. But if a virtual camera moves too fast in virtual space with a shot that's all virtual, your mind knows that that shot isn't real. And the actual speed of the camera move destroys verisimilitude. Now, you, when you're watching this, might not even be aware that that's happening, but it is happening. And that's why the design of CG shots is so important. Now, a lot of visual effects artists, especially if you're working in video games, it's not so important. With video games, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff on cutscenes, because you're not trying to then come back into a scene that's entirely physical with real people. I mean, the problem is if you're shooting a traditional film with people on sets, and then you zing out to a full CGI shot and the camera's whipping through the scene faster than any physical camera can move, verisimilitude's destroyed. Now, a lot of people don't get this, especially when there was a lot of CG shots, all virtual shots in the beginning. A lot of filmmakers thought, well, I'm no longer constrained by a real physical camera. I can move the camera wherever I want. But the problem is it all has to work together. And it's a very difficult thing to learn. It's also a philosophical thing. And there's a lot of people that just don't get it. I remember when people are like, oh my God, we can do this. We can make this stuff happen. Well, that isn't necessarily a good thing. And, with Lord of the Rings, I go back to Lord of the Rings because that was the first time they used a software called Massive, where you could actually create CG armies battling one another, and each member of each army had could think independently. Sometimes they do wacky things, but so it allowed those big battle scenes to be made. But the flip side of that was they had to be very careful how the virtual camera worked, because the camera's like zinging in and flying over. It's already a fantasy film, so you can get away with more. But you still try not to destroy the verisimilitude of the rest of the movie. And Lord of the Rings does a pretty good job of doing that. Sometimes it skates outside of, at least for me, my comfort zone when it comes to, and I've talked about this before, when Saruman says, "To war!" and the camera pulls back across the tops of the orcs. That's clearly a camera move that couldn't have happened. It's too fast for a physical camera move. But because Lord of the Rings is a fantasy film, you buy it. It becomes a big moment. It's cool. But there are times when I think he pushes it a little too far. But that is very true. CGI has become a great tool. David Fincher is a master of recreating period settings using CG. You think that there are not CG, like whether it's in Mindhunter, whether it's in Zodiac, especially Zodiac. If you go watch the making of Zodiac, it's amazing what he did to recreate period 70s and 60s San Francisco. Amazing stuff that he did. Even when a car pulls up on a street corner. That Gareth Edwards, when he was making Godzilla, decided to only shoot Godzilla mostly from the perspective of the man on the street. Very interesting take, because it helped him create verisimilitude. And I think the use of CGI it's evolved certainly over the last 25 years, even more so, but it's been really interesting. And it's just, again, it's a tool, but you need a deft hand for somebody. There are some directors that, we'll just do a big, cool CGI shot here. Well, if the CGI shot doesn't work, that's why it's really important that a director even gets involved in these kinds of shots to keep it all together. And I think a lot of the time, sometimes it goes way overboard. And unless the director is very experienced and knows what they're doing, it can wind up being very, very bad very, very quickly. But like anything else, it's a great tool, and it's allowed filmmakers to show us things we never could have seen before. Jared Mannanen, one day, Mannanen. Jared Mannanen's here. Have you watched Meet the Robinsons? I have not. I love the message of that movie, and the end song, Little Wonders, is one of my feel-good songs. Well, Jared, I need to check that out. And since you asked me, I must get into that and watch that, just because I like the name Jared. Is what a great name. One day I'm going to say it right. I promise. I swear. But yeah, I should. People have told me that before too. I probably should watch Meet the Robinsons. But yeah, I think I need to get on that. And thank you for once again supporting the channel. Very very nice of you to do so. Very much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned yesterday, and I didn't get to them. I have two, not one, but two Willow Yang letters, and this is the first. Now, before I get into this, I have to say, I was talking a while ago about the Netflix series Unnatural Selection that dealt with gene splicing and CRISPR technology and the ramifications of all that and how it was going to affect us. And I thought it was pretty compelling stuff. And I think I called out Willow when I mentioned it and told her she needed to check it out. Now, I'm going to read this, and I know that I'm going to massacre a lot of these terminologies as I do, because Willow writes these great scientific letters, and I know she's cringing as I read them, but I'll try my best. Once again, Willow Talk is here. Willow Talk, Willow Yang. Greetings, Rob. A forewarning. This will be a very long and heavily scientific letter. I'm writing to discuss the Netflix documentary series Unnatural Selection. I thoroughly enjoyed this series. It is a fascinating, provocative, and even slightly terrifying, got that right, examination of the power of CRISPR-Cas9 and the implications that it will have on our health, our environment, and our society. I won't go too much into the actual contents of Unnatural Selection. Rather, I'd like to discuss some of the underlying science that the series has glossed over. I do hope that you will find this interesting. There has never been a letter you have sent me, Willow, that I found less than absolutely compelling, just so you know. What exactly is CRISPR-Cas9? As the name indicates, CRISPR-Cas9 consists of two key components, CRISPR and Cas9. CRISPR is an acronym for clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats, or, in simpler terms, a sequence of DNA whose purpose is to guide an enzyme to make incisions at a specific region of the genome. Cas9 is that enzyme. It is the protein that Dr. Jennifer Doudna had in the test tube at the beginning of the first episode of Unnatural Selection. As you can probably guess, the CRISPR sequence can be altered to target Cas9 to cut at practically any region in the genome to allow gene editing in that area. Like numerous other scientific breakthroughs, CRISPR was actually discovered by accident. The scientists that first characterized the system weren't seeking to develop a genome editing tool. They were actually working for the dairy industry to find methods of protecting important strains of symbiotic bacteria from viral infections. Yes, bacteria do in fact have to deal with viral diseases, just like we do. In certain strains of bacteria, if the cell is infected by a virus and survives the ordeal, a piece of the virus's genetic material gets incorporated into the bacterial genome as part of the CRISPR sequence and is constitutively synthesized in the cell. If the bacteria gets infected by the same strain of virus again, the invading viral DNA will be recognized by the CRISPR sequence, which will immediately employ the Cas9 enzyme to cleave and destroy it. So in a sense, bacteria, as primitive organisms as they might be, actually have a form of adaptive immunity, just like us. Only instead of white blood cells and antibodies, they have CRISPR-Cas9. Contrary to popular belief, CRISPR isn't actually the first genome editing tool to have been developed. By the way, when I first heard of CRISPR technology, I thought CRISPR was an actual machine. I didn't know what it was when this is like 3 or 4 years ago, and I read up on it and I was fascinated. Contrary to popular belief, CRISPR isn't actually the first genome editing tool to have been developed. However, it is currently the most efficient and accurate method that we have. I'm going to take some time here to discuss the current challenges with genome editing that unnatural selection did not really delve into. Firstly, even though CRISPR is our current state-of-the-art technology, it is still quite inefficient. When you use the method to edit a cluster of cells, it will only be in a small fraction of the population that these edits will have actually worked. The average success rate of CRISPR-mediated gene repair was under 10% in 2013. It has substantially increased over the years and will continue on improving as researchers carry on fine-tuning the system. Secondly, as was briefly mentioned in unnatural selection, there is the risk of off-target editing. This occurs when Cas9 makes a mistake and cuts a region of the genome that's not the target sequence, resulting in unwanted mutations. This is a point of concern that a colleague and I have over what the biohackers were doing to themselves, because going off my first point, considering the efficiency of CRISPR is still relatively low, you will require multiple treatments to edit enough target cells to observe any physical effects. With each injection, however, you're putting yourself at risk of acquiring harmful mutations. By the way, this is something that freaked me out. People were hacking their own genetic sequence in attempts to change themselves. Should you actually knock out a tumor suppressor gene or turn on an oncogene, you can end up getting cancer. Thirdly, we cannot engineer traits that don't exist. There aren't, at least not to our current knowledge, any genes that will grant a person the ability to fly, or have invisibility, or heat ray vision. Maybe we can make ourselves taller, stronger, smarter, but we're still a ways off from being able to create superheroes. Finally, even though we do have the full sequence of the human genome, our knowledge in how genes function is still quite limited. This is a complicated biphenomenon known as epistasis, where numerous genes interact and collectively contribute to a complex trait, like intelligence, for example. And pleiotropy, where a single gene is responsible for controlling a multitude of different traits. A version of a gene that is beneficial for one trait can turn out to be detrimental for another trait. A mutation that is completely harmless in one individual may be lethal in another due to differences between the rest of their genomes. My fear is that right now we may think we know more than we actually do. That is a dangerous mindset to have. This brings me to one of the key figures who was featured in Unnatural Selection, the biohacker Dr. Josiah Zayner. While I do understand his perspective, which I will discuss shortly, I do strongly object to one point, and that is his implication that we have already reached a point where we know enough about our genes to be able to confidently make edits that will prove beneficial to us in the long run. There was one point in the final episode that riled me up, and that was when Dr. Zayner was watching the news report about the CRISPR-edited babies in China who were supposedly made HIV resistant, and expressing his frustrations and disgust over the subsequent uproar from the scientific community. Why don't people want their children to be protected from some horrible disease? Well, I completely reject this oversimplification. Sure, you might feel horrible if your child gets infected with HIV, but do you know what else is going to make you feel horrible? knowing that your gene-edited child now has a higher chance of developing severe encephalitis and a short average life expectancy because you removed their CCR5 gene, which encodes the necessary receptor for HIV infection, without understanding the full set of consequences that can stem from its deletion. I believe that there is a reason why traits like HIV resistance is so rare in the natural human population, just as why a lot of drug resistance genes were rare in microbial organisms prior to the advent of extensive antibiotic usage. A lot of the time, these genes aren't actually beneficial in normal environments and come with a cost to another important trait. And it is only under severe conditions, such as when a bunch of antibiotics are being dumped on you, that they're actually positively selected for. It's one thing to try and correct a defective, disease-inducing gene variant. It's another to try enhancing a human using rare gene variants that are still poorly understood and not well characterized. Of course, the big ongoing debate that has resulted from the development of genome editing is the ethics of it all. While I won't delve too much into my personal views, that would take far too long, one recurring theme that continuously gets brought up in unnatural selection is the issue of social inequality and the astronomical costs of healthcare. When gene therapies are costing upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars, the only people that will have access to it are the wealthy elites. It is troubling to me how inflated our current healthcare costs are. The fact that many people who are suffering from debilitating genetic illnesses may never be able to receive treatment, not because there isn't one, but because they don't have the means of paying for it. What's even more disturbing, however, is the notion that if we do reach a point where we start making human enhancements, such procedures will not only be available to the rich and powerful, and they will be continuously on improving themselves and widen the social gap, essentially creating their own master race. Even though I disagree with Dr. Zahner on some of his views, the one thing that I do agree with him on is the necessity of making gene editing, should we start using it, available to everyone. It is an exciting and somewhat frightening era that we're living in, and I'm fascinated to see how CRISPR will ultimately impact our society for better or for worse. I think that education is of the utmost importance in the face of this burgeoning revolution. As was outlined in Unnatural Selection, all the information that you will need to know about genome editing is available to the public online. We probably owe it to ourselves to learn how the technique works, what it can do, its limitations and risks, so that we will be able to make informed decisions when the time comes. Knowledge is power. Best regards, Willow. Well, Willow, first of all, I tell you, reading your letters gets me all hot and bothered. Whew. But anyway, let me just say that Unnatural Selection was a fascinating medical documentary on Netflix, and I highly recommend it. The idea is if you want to be a writer, and I couldn't help but think that this documentary is going to inspire how many episodes of monster television or the new version of Jeff Goldblum's The Fly. Rather than using telepods, it's got to be all about CRISPR and gene therapies and all that. But what a great letter. I always love that you put this stuff in our in the proper sort of framework, and I appreciate that you do so. This one comes from Curtis. Well, first of all, let me see. You guys have been sending more chats in. But yeah, I loved Unnatural Selection. I was watching it like I was all clenched up, like, ugh. People are experimenting on themselves. On one hand, I'm like, ugh, but on the other hand, I'm like, what terrible thing is going to happen? I mean, and I felt bad that I was feeling that way, but I was waiting. Rick Berg says, add to the beehive, Robinson Crusoe on Mars. I love Robinson Crusoe on Mars. And by the way, Criterion put that out on DVD and Blu-ray. And by the way, what is cool about Robinson Crusoe on Mars? They actually reuse the Martian war machine from War of the Worlds in that movie. Yes, they do. The James Eversole Jr. movie podcast writes, I can't even believe I'm going to read this. Hey, Rob, I'm married to the love of my life, but today she told me that hot toys are stupid. I'm going to miss her, Rob. We had a good run. Well, James, I have to tell you, honestly, I think ultimately when I was buying action figures as a kid, I was using them to make up stories and imagine and play. And uh, nowadays, they're just this expensive drain on my resources that I put in shelves and keep in boxes and keep buying. And they're vestiges of my childhood. So I probably shouldn't be buying them. I should probably be just saving that money and go on to a vacation to Barbados or something. Or maybe, fly up to Vancouver and see Willow Yang and just make her tell me these things in person over alcohol, because I could see that could be exciting as well. But I love Hot Toys. I love them because they're the best versions of the toys I had when I was a kid. And the fact that they're almost perfect replicas of things I've seen in movies that inspire me. They inspire me to one day. My goal is to make something where I've made a film where they would be worthy of Hot Toys wanting to make something from the movie that I made. But I like the characters. They make me happy seeing physical representations of characters that I've enjoyed, whether it's Star Wars or the DCEU characters. And also, the great thing about the Hot Toys figures of superheroes is I've been buying superhero figures since I was a kid too, and they're usually the best iteration of superhero figures that have ever existed. Certainly the Iron Man range, of which they've made so many of, are amazing. The die-cast Iron Man figures, they're amazing. Incredible. The toy engineering, so amazing. So amazing. Very toyetic. The Richard is here. The Richard says, "Aloha, Rob. Meridian, Kiss of the Beast with Sherilyn Fenn. I finally found it again. That film was incredible for a 15-year-old boy with his own TV. Was planning to talk Full Moon in general. I'm now thinking Meridian. No, what you're really thinking about is Sherilyn Fenn. And when you start thinking about Sherilyn Fenn, you can go a couple different directions, but there's only one place everyone needs to wind up. And you know what I'm going to say? 3 words. 2 Moon Junction. I don't know why, but when I was in college, there was 2 surefire ways to make sure that a date with a lady, whether it was in a dorm room or in my apartment later, would always turn out the way I wanted it to. And I don't know why, but 2 Moon Junction was one, and The Lost Boys was another. Maybe it's because both Richard Tyson and Billy Wirth, got the ladies in the mood. It was that long hair back in the late 80s. I don't know, but 2 Moon Junction, boy, let me tell you. But thanks once again, Richard, for supporting the channel. I very much appreciate that. But yeah, Meridian, Kiss the Beast. Come on now. Man Mountain Gherkin 23 is here. My opinion, Patrick Stewart and Brett Spiner are the best acting thespians in Star Trek history. Agree or disagree? Huh. Well, clearly they're great actors. But Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner, I mean, they're clearly great actors, but especially Brent Spiner. I mean, he was fairly limited in what he was able to do with that character. However, he did make you believe, man. You believed in Data, but he didn't get a chance to stretch. But again, recreating that character for 178 episodes and 4 feature films, pretty amazing. And of course, Patrick Stewart is Patrick Stewart. And there are times, such as I think about the 6th season episode, Chain of Command Part 2, There Are 4 Lights, The Inner Light, and of course, Sarek. I think he does some of his great acting in Sarek. Such a great episode. But yeah, I mean, they're great. I wouldn't say you're talking about the best series regular actors. But I would say that there are other actors that, since you didn't say series regular actors. I mean, look at Deep Space Nine. Frank Langella was on, recurring. Louise Fletcher, and of course, I also think John Delancey is an incredible actor. I mean, what a Whoopi Goldberg, certainly a great actor. But I know what you mean in terms of series regular actors. Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart are definitely right up there. But Kate Mulgrew, maybe not theatrically or Shakespearean. There's a lot of great actors in Star Trek, but I do think that playing their characters, certainly Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart knocked it out of the park, but they were kind of constrained in what they were able to do and what they were called upon to do. You know, I hate to say it, you might say he's hammy, but Shatner, you know, he'll do an episode like Plato's Stepchildren or Turnabout Intruder, and then he can turn around and do an episode like Balance of Terror in that moment when he's talking to Dr. McCoy and he says, "Why me?" You know, it's a little over the top. It's a little operatic. Well, it's a lot over the top. It's just different. And, but I do think I understand your point, and I think you are not necessarily wrong. But Star Trek has certainly had a lot of great actors. A lot of great actors. This one, again, Curtis Joseph writes in, "Dear Robert, I'm writing to you and the fellow fandom that greatly enjoys the amazing community family that is the Burnettwork in regards to last week's show 272, The Fate of the Great Franchises. In this golden age of entertainment that we all can escape to from time to time, be it films, television, streaming services, audiobooks, and video games, how about just books? It is far rather interesting that the great old franchises, which one could say is yesteryear properties, in their current relevance of importance and existence to the younger generations. Let's start with Star Wars as a whole. As a fan, I am truly disappointed the sequel trilogy is an epic failure to present good crafted storylines for the first two installments. As the rise of Skywalker grows ever closer in the upcoming few weeks to release in cinemas, I have to say, as much as there have been a lot in degree through many of fans that have given up on Star Wars and mostly like or may not see the film until it's released as a torrent. I think what you're trying to say is there's a lot of fans that don't that agree that they're not going to see The Rise of Skywalker until it's available on physical media or they can torrent a bootleg copy. With that being said, I have to say, and with great respect to everyone's opinions, and I truly mean this, I have watched on YouTube over the course of the past 3 years that there's a great many pundits who have completely given up on Lucasfilm's 40-plus-year-old franchise. I further believe this is entirely true. I'll explain. With the 4 recent films that have come and gone in cinemas, the sequel trilogy fails to hold a candle to the original and prequel trilogies as far as an overall narrative. Yes, Return of the Jedi is an acquired taste in celluloid escapism, and The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones had their cringeworthy acting and story. Nevertheless, these 2 previous trilogies had great direction from getting to point A to B without the fuss of unnecessary white noise that is clogging the sequel trilogy. To give up on a franchise is to give up on it entirely. Its existence, its history, its presence, and its inevitable future. This is the current state of Western culture, to cancel a franchise from pop culture way, way too easily. I am a 45-year-old Canadian-born writer and voice actor who, like many that haven't given up on the Star Wars franchise, thoroughly understand and empathize with those fans who are greatly disappointed with Disney's direction of a much-beloved property. It was once said that the Star Wars films were a major event to go see in cinemas. Every 3 years, a fairly good new story, grand, expansive new worlds, and incredibly memorable fictional characters that are close to being timeless. It is fair to say the Terminator saga has taken a great blow to the abdomen for it to continue forward in its current weak state. That being said, the principle applies to it as well, that the Terminator franchise needs to go on a short hiatus for 4 years and come back fully rebooted with fresh, new, injected creativity from both sides of the producers, the writers, the highly competent directing. Bottom line, a group of professionals in all sections who truly care about all that makes the franchise once great, yet propel it forward with fictional narratives within the franchise that can greatly lift up, elevate, and create new competent characters in a deeply engaging world that we and future audiences have yet to experience. I sincerely agree with you, Rob, that the ever-constant, distracting daily narratives that social justice warriors are pushing are the primary ones causing a lot of damage to the current fandom and a few big franchises. It is bogus and nonsensical. As much as there are many voices throughout these past 3 years bellowing out true disgust for the sequel trilogy for good reasons, we all have to allow a depth of space with rationality. And we as fans, customers and fans of the franchise, Nothing more and nothing less at the end of the day. At best, nobody on this beautiful earth can truly ruin something for you unless you first give up within yourself in silent consent and choose to be truly disturbed and not respect those who in fact are not as powerful as they appear in their daily lives. I love Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and the Terminator franchises for all that they are as a whole. Disney's Star Wars will have a great course correction. It is inevitable. We as fans should never be in denial of the necessary upcoming changes. As a seasoned professional writer for the past 11 years, astutely, it is very accurately true that a bottom line in investment for Disney needed to be made first and foremost. Yet with the forthcoming 3-year hiatus to come, Star Wars has an absolute chance to return to being a major event in cinemas. And hopefully they can rethink releasing installments for whatever new trilogy they commission going forward to be out every 2.5 or 3 years once, like George Lucas did effortlessly. Disney can seriously benefit releasing a film every 3 years. Those are my thoughts. I greatly love this channel and the fantastic community. Sorry I prattled on a little too long, but I felt it's my first time writing for you, Robert, and I want to give an honest and fresh perspective from a new voice joining the community. With that being said, I look forward to writing in again. Kind regards, Curtis Joseph, Toronto, Ontario. Well, Curtis, thank you for that letter. Thanks for writing in. I appreciate that. Great to have a new voice. And I think you're right. Like I was trying to say, when Bob Iger bought Star Wars, it had laid fallow for almost a decade when he purchased it. I mean, Lucasfilm, 2012? Spent a lot of money, $4 billion. I can't imagine ever having $4 billion, much less spending it on something. If I had $4 billion, can you imagine spending it? I know there's stock options and all that, but $4 billion. Can you imagine looking at your $4 billion in your bank account and then it disappears? That'd be terrifying. But yes, so Disney Star Wars, first and foremost, had to make sure that their investment was returned. So right now they've basically broken even. Maybe not. And everyone's talking about, well, the toys aren't selling. And that, by the way, is true. Hot toys of the sequel trilogy do not sell nearly as well as the classic trilogy stuff. They just don't. And I think that the new trilogy characters, the new sequel trilogy characters have not caught on in the zeitgeist. But I don't necessarily think that it's just the fault of corporately controlled Star Wars. I think the world has changed. And what's so funny is the Star Wars universe is the most inviting of all universes. Like you get something people want to love more than any other franchise, I think, ever in the history of, I don't know, ever. I mean, I wasn't around in ancient Greece when today the new myth from Euripides or whatever, I don't know, is coming out. It's going to be performed live on stage. I don't know if people were excited about things back then. But now we live in a world where there's so much entertainment from all over the place. And despite all that, people want to love Star Wars. And I think it's going to stick around, like you've said. And I think that now that Disney has sort of paid back their coffers, it's now, let's say, a wash. But kids aren't playing with toys the way they used to, action figures and things like that. The Toys R Us's have sort of gone away. Hopefully they'll come back. But what kids are interested in is just different than it was 42 years ago when Star Wars first came out, and rightfully so. Just like, the DVD used to be it made so much money for Hollywood. Things have changed. Physical media is going away. You can no longer rely on that income. It's all different. Galaxy's Edge as an event, as a place to go, I think it was underestimated. I think Galaxy's Edge was a place that was conceived by the way, I have nothing to back this up, but it was conceived as more of an experiential place that when you get there, you get to walk around and imagine you're in the Star Wars universe. That in itself was supposed to be the attraction. And a lot of Disney was conceived as taking you to mythical America, Why do you walk in on Main Street? What Walt Disney was trying to do was create this Americana, this place that was evocative of the dream of what America was in all Americans. And that's why you walk through Main Street when you get into Disneyland before you go to Fantasyland or Tomorrowland or Frontierland. You know, that's what it was designed to be. And I think that ethos was what drove Galaxy's Edge. Now, of course, Rise of the Resistance is not, it's not working yet. And they needed to get it out. I think they wanted to get it out for this year in support of things like Rise of Skywalker. It'll all shake out eventually. And while, you know, when Elizabeth last weekend, I watched Rogue One again. While I have problems with Rogue One, I would like to have delved more into the characters' backstories. I would like to have seen the characters, like give me 5 or 10 minutes of each character before you meet them, showing them in their original milieu. I would like to have seen that before we met them, so we had a little bit more backstory. But the rest of that movie it's pretty. I think it's pretty good. You know, I really enjoy it. The space battle at the end is great. It's pretty satisfying, and the acting is really, really good. I like what they did with it. I just think the story, I'm not as invested as I want to be. I wanted more story there. But, you know, and even Solo, while it's one of those movies where let's explain how this character became this character in a couple of days, there's a lot I think that I like about Solo, even though it's not perfect. But yeah, they're gonna once the pressure is off, there's always gonna be pressure, but once the great financial pressure was off, I mean, what if it hadn't worked? What if Force Awakens hadn't worked? We forget. We live in a world where Force Awakens made $2 billion. And now people love that movie when it came out. And now we've had a chance to go back and you see that these new characters just don't resonate. When you've got other characters in different shows and different movies that people love, you need to do better. And the characters in Force Awakens, I had the same problem with Star Trek Voyager. Star Trek Voyager was a copy of a copy of a copy. You're watching a crew of Star Trek characters that are they're amalgamations of other Star Trek characters. They're not fiercely original. They tried to be. They started out with Tuvok was undercover with the Maquis. They should have leaned more into that. But then again, you would have had variations on a theme. I fear the Picard show has been written by people that are going to be giving us basically characters from other things all put together. And I don't think that works. That's why I think you watch things like The Expanse, and the characters in The Expanse, they're literary based. They come from the books. And that's why I think the show has caught on. The characters are really interesting. They're really compelling. They're multifaceted. While they're variations on a theme, they're all new characters that we've seen, characters that are like them. But these characters are pretty unique and interesting. And I think that's what makes movies great. And I think we had our Star Wars characters. And as I said, it baffles me why they didn't make one grand adventure, one last hurrah adventure with all of our characters together, and then introduce the characters peripherally in that film and then passed off the torch rather than put these new characters. I mean, when you see Max von Sydow and you see Oscar Isaac at the beginning of Star Wars, you're looking at people and you're like, who are they? And what's really interesting is if you look at the structure of Star Wars, the first characters you meet in the original Star Wars is R2 and 3PO, who are clearly robots. So when you're looking at robots, you're not going, I wonder what their personalities are like. And then you meet Princess Leia, who's basically wordless, but you can see that they're interacting. There'll be no escape for the princess this time. Everything you saw in the crawl is then reiterated the next couple of minutes of the movie. So you're being eased into this world, and you don't even really meet the first human character, which is Luke and Uncle Owen, until almost a half an hour into the movie, where the world has been set up for you. You're following these robots, and you're not going, well, what are their characters like? You get it. They even have more character than you even think they do. So you're being eased into that. When you're watching Star Wars, The Force Awakens, you're watching these two characters that you know nothing about, other than the crawl tells you their best. It doesn't say Poe Dameron. It says the Resistance's best pilot. You know nothing about him, and when he starts talking, you know, who are these people? Why am I looking at Max von Sydow, one of the great actors in cinema history? You know, all the way back to The New Land, The Immigrants, or whatever, the Swedish films he did. Ingmar Bergman movies, you know, Seventh Seal, Exorcist, all that. And you're looking at him, and you're like, who is this guy? And as a Star Wars fan, you're like, you don't even get to meet them. I mean, think about how Han Solo, Captain of the Millennium Falcon. You know, he literally introduces himself when you meet Han Solo and says who he is. You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. I mean, you're being told this information. You're like, oh, okay, this guy's this pilot. And then you actually see with his interaction with Greedo, which really has nothing to do with the plot of the film. It's just a character moment. I mean, what you're doing is when you meet Poe Dameron in Force Awakens, you're seeing a Star Wars archetypical character that we already kind of know from years of Star Wars that we're supposed to just get. Same with Kylo Ren. And it doesn't work because you don't know who they are. You're not given anything to set those characters up. And that's my problem with the entire new sequel trilogy, is we don't know who these people really are. I mean, you know, when we meet Rey, she's interacting with BB-8, but when we first meet her, okay, she's a scavenger. But you always when you meet characters, you learn about who they are when they have interactions with other people, you know, and you can't meet them in mid-interaction. You know, you can unless you have some kind of context. And I just think that was one of the problems with the prequel trilogy. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot more people. There's a lot more people. Willow Yang is back. By the way, I have another letter from Willow that I have perhaps Willow Yang's funniest letter, and you're all going to want to stick around and hear it. Willow Yang says, I was at a lab meeting, so I missed the first hour of your show. Did you ever manage to see The Irishman in the theater, or have you given up? I've not managed to see The Irishman in the theater, and considering it's going to debut in 2 days, I don't think I'm going to, and I'm very, very sad about that. I'm very angry, Willow. Did you miss me reading your letter about CRISPR? Stubble McShave says, Rene Auberjonois was great despite all the makeup. He was great. Salome Jens is a founder. You know what? If you're going to talk Brent Spiner as Data as being one of the great actors of the franchise, you cannot then not say Rene Auberjonois, because he is amazing. He's amazing as Odo. He's a terrific actor. Did a great job with his part. Nick Markins is here. Nick Markins says, hello, Rob. I just finished watching Forbidden Planet for the first time. I wanted to thank you for all the classic sci-fi movie recommendations through your live chats on the show. Well, Nick, isn't Forbidden Planet a wonderful film? What a wonderful movie. It's so much fun, and it has a really interesting philosophical underpinning to it, and a hot babe and a crazy monster and a robot and basically prototype for Star Trek. I'm glad you really liked it. And, you know, I'm glad people appreciate the recommendations I give them, because, look, I love this stuff, and I've watched all these movies already, so I can point you in the directions of the movies you should watch and the movies that you probably should avoid. So, yes. Anthony Gonzalez says, I'd say Alexander Siddig for a top actor in Trek. Absolutely. Or Siddig El Fadil, as he was billed when he first started. I love Bashir. Alexander Siddig is a great actor, and it's nice to see he's popping up all over the place. And it's great to see him in so many different roles. Again, Deep Space Nine, to me, especially the secondary cast, what a group of actors on that show. So good. The Richard says, Cronenberg's Crash, as odd as it is, it was a go-to sexy film in my early romantic life. The music is intense by Howard Shore, who also scored Lord of the Rings. Acting so passionate, lighting and cinematography all hypnotic, dialogue, God, so sexy. Thoughts? Well, the Richard, I love David Cronenberg's Crash. Of course, it's based on the novel of the same name. And Crash is an amazing. It's by Anthony Burgess, right? Crash is by Anthony Burgess. Let me get this right, because I want to say it's by Anthony Burgess. Let's see. Oh, pardon me. I'm wrong. It's by J.G. Ballard. I should totally know that. I can't believe I said it was by Anthony Burgess. I was thinking Clockwork Orange. See, even that's why I had to check. J.G. Ballard. J.G. Ballard, who wrote Empire of the Sun. For those of you who have not seen Cronenberg's Crash, and a lot of people haven't because it's not readily available, Crash is basically, it's set in Toronto, or I guess, but it is, in sort of a vaguely disaffected, futuristic Toronto, but not really. It's about a cult of people that believe some of the greatest sexual experiences you can have in life are when your body is penetrated during a car crash. I kid you not. And it's all about sort of that desire. And the movie opens with a few unbelievably steamy. I mean, look, it's funny now because you can just go to Pornhub or RedTube or whatever, and you can watch whatever you want sexually. But, you know, when that stuff wasn't available, I always appreciated real eroticism in movies that were non-pornographic. Because it was too easy when you carried over into the porn realm, it became more mechanical. You're watching mechanics more than anything else. And by the way, don't get me wrong, porn's great, but I really did appreciate, like, in the beginning of Crash, there's even a scene in an edit bay, a sex scene in an edit bay, and there's something beyond just getting body parts together. There was a sensuality to Crash, even though it gets twisted, but the beginning has these sex scenes. There's one in a airplane hangar with a small plane. It's just look, human sexuality is pretty ludicrous when you think about it, like the actual when you're standing back, but when you're in it, like if you're, you know, the sensuality of for me, a woman's body, the curves, orifices, the tastes, the smells, the sensuality of being with somebody, like being all consuming. You felt that at the beginning of Crash, and it's great. But then it gets really weird. It gets Cronenbergian, and David Cronenberg is one of my favorite directors. And for those of you who don't know Cronenberg, one of his early films, his first feature was called Shivers, but it was released as They Came From Within in America. His second movie was Rabid, which the Soska sisters just remade. His third movie was The Brood. His fourth movie was Scanners. And then he made Videodrome and The Dead Zone and The Fly and Dead Ringers. But his first movies were all about, and his student films too, were all about body horror. A lot of his movies have been obsessed with the link between the fact that we are intellectual beings, whether you call it our soul, our spirit, our intellect, whatever, that we're being carried around in our bodies that at any one moment could revolt against us. Like, you never know. And all of his movies are about that. And They Came From Within, Shivers, which was the first Cronenberg movie that I ever saw was Shivers, was They Came From Within. And I saw it on a second bill. It was a second feature with Motel Hell, I think in 1980, I think. And the thing about, here's what They Came From Within is about. They Came From Within is about a doctor. First of all, it's all set in this apartment complex, this new apartment complex where everything you want is available in this apartment complex. By the way, as a total aside, there's a movie with Tom Hiddleston that deals with some of these things that's also based on a J.G. Ballard novel called High Rise that came out a couple of years ago. It's pretty bonkers. And if you haven't seen High Rise, it's not a Cronenberg film, but it's very Cronenbergian in its conceits. And it would make the perfect double bill with They Came From Within. So in They Came From Within, there's a doctor who's doing these experiments, and he's trying to create this parasite that can be put into the human body that can replace damaged organs. And he's doing experiments on people, well, this young girl that he's having a relationship with. And what happens is these parasites that look like creeping penises, really, they get into your body and they basically start pumping you full of this. They turn you into basically an erotic zombie where all you can think about is satiating your carnal desires. And it basically, well, I don't want to tell you what happens. And it's very low budget. I mean, it's very low budget, but it's got verve and wit. and there's and like all Cronenberg movies, his early movies, his body horror movies that I love, it's all about the body turning against the intellect, turning against the rational human that's inside of you. And through various things that happen, The Brood, which I think is a genius low budget film, the Brood, which I've talked about before, is about the horrible detrimental effects of the destruction of the family unit on both the spouses and their children. And it has this really interesting idea called psycho-plasmics, created by Dr. Hal Raglan, who's portrayed by Oliver Reed. And the idea of psycho-plasmics is that you're supposed to take whatever's going on inside of you, and you're supposed to externalize it. Like, get rid of your rage by externalizing it, using your body to slough it out, to get it out of you. And it isn't always pretty. And I'll leave it there. But Cronenberg does a lot of that, and in his movies, in his early movies. I mean, I was a horny kid that was interested in horror as well, and his movies always, they were very sexual, and they delved into those things. When I heard he was going to make Crash, I'm like, all right. And Deborah Kara Unger and James Spader. It's like Deborah Kara Unger and James Spader and Elias Koteas. I mean, Deborah Kara Unger and James Spader, my God. What a delicious pairing that was. Anyway, sorry. I don't mean to go off, but yes, Crash, yeah. It's just, Crash is a movie that's all about being a guy and just wanting to put your mouth all over every part of a woman's body. And I'm a firm believer in that. So watch Crash, everybody. Watch Crash. If you haven't, and by the way, Crash is currently being restored. It's not available on Blu-ray, but it's being restored in 4K. And I don't know if it's done yet. It was supposed to be done this month. So I can't wait to get it on Blu-ray. Hopefully they'll release it on 4K, because it's an incredible film. It's not for everybody. It's a little cold and distant, but and the Howard Shore score is very odd, very avant-garde. By the way, Howard Shore, who scored Lord of the Rings for Peter Jackson, is Canadian, I believe, and he scored a lot of Cronenberg's earlier movies. Certainly things like Scanners, and he did a lot of avant-garde work as a musician. And it's funny when you see, oh my God, the guy who scored Lord of the Rings scored Crash. Well, listen to the Crash score, and you see where his avant-garde background came from. But yeah, the Richard says also, with your love of Her, any other films like it? Your story reminded me of my favorite Twilight Zone episode ever, The Lonely. It's so good. Prisoner on an asteroid awaiting release, but the police deliver him a hot robot. There's nothing really like Her. Her is to me, it's one of my favorite science fiction films of the last 10 years. It's such a great movie, but there's a thing about Her that I always thought that I think in this day and age, and it's happened to me, when you follow somebody on social media and you watch them a lot, and I'm not saying this is me personally on this show for somebody else out there, but I'm saying that for me, it's very easy to think that you know somebody, because look, people come to the show every day. I've been talking for hundreds of hours, and I think you get to know me, but you only get to know the person I am, right here. You don't know the person that can sit at a table like this for 16 hours and meticulously paint a Star Destroyer model and listen to U2's Achtung Baby 20 times because I don't want to change the music. I mean, there's that element to me as well. But you do get these, you can fall in love with people. I mean, I find the whole idea of catfishing and all that people develop relationships with one another in their minds. Like, you can think that you have a personal relationship with somebody that you've never met. I can develop, or people can develop, you fall in love with women or actresses. There's I forget her name, but there's this woman who does, she's got a genre site. She's probably way too young. I can't even admit this, but and I forget the name of her channel, but she's an online pundit. She's beautiful. I mean, you can't watch her channel and not, I mean, I can't not develop a crush on her because but I don't know her. I've never met her. But I know, I bet, at least in my mind, I think, oh, okay, I bet if we hung out, we'd hit it off. But that isn't true. That's based on nothing. It's based on somebody's persona. It's like falling in love with an actor. That's one of the things I loved about her so much, is that, you know, people have relationships with one another. They meet via texting or you meet online, and and you can develop an entire relationship. You impose all of these ideas and thoughts and things that you want from somebody on people that you've never met, that you're only dealing with them through text or whatever. And I thought her was an interesting movie that kind of, it doesn't address it directly, but I kind of got that from it, that you fall in love with a voice, or you fall in love with somebody on the other end of a device. With her, it's an actual operating system. But to me, it was like a metaphor for anybody who falls in love with somebody that they've never met. So I don't think there's any other movie quite like her. There are other subjects or other movies that cover that same subject matter, but not quite in the same way. So I think her is kind of unique. I think that's why I kind of like it. And it's not necessarily like falling in love with a machine, because if you have a machine that's there, like now people have real dolls that they fall in love with or whatever, but in the case of her, you're falling in love with an intellect. You know, you're falling in love with somebody who's disembodied, you know, and I think what's really interesting is you can fall in love with the distillation of it's just very interesting, because, you know, there are people that might be the greatest people in the world, but if they don't turn you on, or you're not attracted to them for whatever reason, not that they could be attractive, and for whatever reason they don't float your boat. You know, I'm not I don't fall in love with every attractive person in the world that I see. But if you met somebody from a distance, or via online, or you never met them face to face, that's what the whole thing about catfishing. That's why I'm fascinated by that too, is because you fall in love with somebody without ever seeing them, and then when you find them, and they're not what you want, it's fascinating. So I don't think that there's any movie quite like her. I don't know. Stubble McShave says, I don't think most people appreciate the effort of playing such roles as Odo, Quark, and Garrick, with the extensive makeup and the long grinding days. Stubble, 100%. And the fact that both Armin Shimmerman, Rene Auberjonois, and of course Mark Alamo, the fact that they're acting under full prosthetic makeup and they're able to create those indelible characters speaks volumes about their ability to act. And all three of those roles are phenomenal. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're absolutely right about that. And they don't get enough credit. You know, they don't get enough. And speaking of that, Andreas Katsoulis is Jakar. Jakar on Babylon 5, another unbelievable acting performance. Amir B is here. He just sent me a super chat saying just supporting the channel. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for Amir B. Thank you. And write me more letters. The Richard also says, someone brought up Jackson's Brain Dead. Any others like this? Well, I mean, I think Jackson's early movies, such as, well, I love Bad Taste. If you guys haven't seen Peter Jackson's Bad Taste, apparently he's restoring those movies. His X-rated puppet movie, Meet the Feebles, which if you haven't seen Meet the Feebles, woo! And then, of course, Brain Dead. That trilogy is early trilogy. And within in there, I don't know if he made it within those three movies or right outside. Then, of course, his movie Heavenly Creatures. Peter Jackson, what an incredible talent. But you want to see a movie that's full of wacky, mirth-filled fun. Bad Taste. So much fun. It's basically about aliens that want to set up, well, for lack of a better term, a fast food franchise on Earth using human beings as the food. It's wacky. I mean, again, really low budget. Really low budget. Just Plain Steve is here. Just Plain Steve says, I'm going to do it, Rob. I have 2 weeks off at Christmas, and I'm going to watch all the Star Wars movies and The Mandalorian all for the first time. Hey, you guys. What's up? Oh, someone's here. So see, the dogs are here. Tallulah, have a kale and what are these? Duck, lamb, and kale. I kid you not. Duck, lamb, and kale. So I won't give you cookies. I'll give you duck, lamb, and kale. How about that? How about that? Okay. Oh, you have a toy in your mouth. You can have duck, lamb, and kale. You can't. You have a toy in your mouth, Tallulah. Okay, let the toy go. You have duck, lamb, and kale. Tell you. So let me read this again, Just Plain Steve, because you were so rudely interrupted. I'm going to do it, Rob. I have 2 weeks off at Christmas, and I'm going to watch all the Star Wars movies and The Mandalorian, all for the first time. Wish me luck. Any recommendations for viewing order? Okay. Here's what I think that you should do. This is what I think you should do. You should watch them in the order of original release. You should watch Star Wars, not A New Hope, just Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi. Then episode 1, 2, and 3. Then watch The Mandalorian, because you got to watch. I know it's not in release order, but The Mandalorian takes place after Jedi, number of years. You know what? Here's the thing. You can't watch Rogue One before Star Wars because the endings of Rogue One doesn't really make a lot of sense. So Star Wars Empire Jedi, watch Star Wars Empire Jedi, then watch episodes 1, 2, and 3. You know what? Just watch them as they came out. Experience them as all fans experience them. That's the way to do it. Don't be cheeky about it. Don't go back and watch it in order, because it's better if you watch it the way it came out. Have the experience of how the world experienced the Star Wars movies. That's what I would say to that. By the way, when you do that, report back. We got to know, Just Plain Steve. What did it do to you? Amir B says, Rob, I sent you a letter on The Irishman last week. I got to read that then. I got to find that. So yes, that's what I would suggest you do. This one comes from, I already read that one. Let's see. What is this next one here? I'm coming to the end of them. James Sparrow writes, Rob Laser Bob. I was Laser Bob when I worked at Silver Platters in Seattle in the late 80s. On a previous letter I wrote, you seem to be familiar with the 90s TV show Sliders. Yes, because I mentioned the Cro-Mags. I was wondering what you thought of the show, and with the 25th anniversary of the show's beginning in March, wondering if it's time for a reboot. I myself think it is, but I wouldn't be opposed to George R.R. Martin's Doorways seeing its way to TV either. That's a good idea. I'm a huge fan of George R.R. Martin's work. And before Game of Thrones, like, didn't the Canadian Outer Limits, they did Sand Kings, right? I would love to see his book Fever. If you want to read a cool book, George R.R. Martin's Fever Dream about vampires on the Mississippi River. That's the stuff. I liked Sliders. It was a bit goofy about these characters sliding into different alternate universes. John Rhys Davies was in it for a while. I liked it. Jerry O'Connell. It was a good show. I mean, it was a little cheesy. And then when it came up with this continuity where there was this, I guess, were they aliens? Did they come from a different Earth? The Cro-Mags, the Cro-Magnon men. I found it's cheesy fun, but I like Sliders. I used to know Tracy Torme a little bit when I wrote for Sci-Fi Universe magazine. I think Tracy created the show, or he's the head writer of the show, but I like Sliders. It was fun. I mean, back when 90s sci-fi, there was a lot of those kinds of shows. I thought Sliders never had the budget it needed, but I liked it. I like Sliders. I thought it was good. Brian Eng is here. Brian Eng says, how's this for woke? The Charlie's Angels soundtrack has a song called Don't Call Me an Angel. It's the name of the movie. Yeah, I know. I don't understand. Like, I don't ever want to live in a world where I don't watch Crash and I don't watch James Spader kneeling before Deborah Kara Unger and opening her up and doing what he does to her at the beginning of David Cronenberg's Crash. And I don't want to not get turned on by that. And I feel like the point of Charlie's Angels, the whole point of it was all about titillation. It was all about taking these three hot women so I understand turning it into a Mission Impossible franchise. I get what you're trying to do, but you're taking a show whose DNA was really about treading on like Farrah Fawcett Majors and Jacqueline Smith and Kate Jackson, these three beautiful women in the 70s. That's how they sold the show. It was about sex appeal. So if you want to get rid of that from the show's DNA, I think there's something wrong. I mean, they leaned into that and made it funny in the early 2000s Charlie's Angels, the McG Charlie's Angels. And in this Charlie's Angels, I felt in taking away some of that was sort of strange, because that's what Charlie's Angels began as. So I think you might be right about that. Yeah. It's weird, Brian Eng. Why would you make Charlie's Angels is like the last thing that you should make woke. The Richard says, Takashi Miike. One of my favorite directors. Oh, Ichi the Killer. But have you seen Happiness of the Katakuris? All types of film styles, musical, claymation, family owns a Cursed Mountain Resort. Dude, I have Happiness of the Katakuris on, I don't have it on Blu-ray, I have it on DVD. I love Miike. I love Audition, if you haven't seen Audition. Visitor Q. I just pre-ordered his new movie. Is it Love Affair? He's amazing. One of the most prolific. He's done martial arts films. He's twisted. I love his version of twisted sexuality as well. By the way, one of my favorite of his movies is Fudo. And if you haven't seen Fudo, it's basically a Chinese gangster movie where the gangsters are kids. There's a scene in a strip club where a stripper uses a blow dart to kill a rival crime boss. Let's just say she blows the dart from not her mouth. If you guys haven't seen any of his movies, start with Fudo. Start with Fudo or Audition. Yes, he's an incredible filmmaker. And he's made almost like 100 movies or something. They're amazing. Chuck Philpott says, yes, the order of release. I say this all the time. You know what? I think that's the way to go. I mean, a lot of people would say to watch the Star Wars movie in the machete order, where you watch Star Wars and Empire, and then you go back, and the machete order is you cut away Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and you watch Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and then go to Jedi. Although I'm more convinced now than ever, especially if you've never seen the movies before and you don't have this great attachment to them, watch them in the original release order, because that's what you'll get all of that. You'll get all that. Wow, there's been a lot of a lot of stuff that's been brought up. Miike, I've never pronounced Takashi, his last name, correctly. So if anybody can phonetically spell it out for me, please do so. So yes. Oh, and you know what? Another letter from Willow Yang that's not scientific, but man, I got to give it up for Willow for writing this letter, because it just made me overjoyed. This is a great letter. It's the last letter of the day. You can still fire in chats if you want, but this is the last letter I have to read. This is a great letter. Greetings, Rob. A change of pace. There's just something that I need to get off my chest. I'm writing in to express my adoration and wax lyrical about the irreproachable masterpiece known as SpongeBob SquarePants. Yes, you read that right. I'm an unabashed, grown-ass adult SpongeBob fan, and it has recently been brought to my attention that people from beyond a certain generation may not have the same appreciation for the show that it deserves, nay, commands. Okay, boomer. I believe that it is my sacred duty to enlighten the ignorant on the gospel of the shamelessly flamboyant, infectiously optimistic, porous hero and his teachings in love, friendship, and the art of Krabby Patty flipping. In all seriousness, I loved SpongeBob as a child, and I've continued on enjoying reruns from the first few seasons well into adulthood. The show has markedly changed in style in more recent seasons. What I really liked about the cartoon is its whimsical, wacky premise. The story follows the adventures of an anthropomorphic sponge. He's supposed to be a sea sponge, but is drawn as a kitchen sponge, who lives in a hollowed-out pineapple house in the underwater city of Bikini Bottom. In addition to the eponymous character, other major denizens featured on the show include Patrick, a dim-witted starfish who literally lives under a rock, Sandy, a Texan squirrel scientist who wears a diving suit in order to survive underwater. Squidward, a pompous cephalopod with big artistic aspirations. Mr. Krabs, the miserly crustaceous owner of a fast food burger joint that's famous for their Krabby Patties. And Plankton, the scheming unicellular villain of the show, whose shortcomings in stature are more than made up for by his ruthlessness and tenacity. And that is just a sample of the more normal characters. There are deities, superheroes, spirits, and a live-action pirate who lives in a mysterious surface kingdom known as Los Angeles. And going meta is the president of the SpongeBob fan club. And while the cartoon certainly features a lot of juvenile humor and slapstick comedy that's entertaining to its main target demographic, it does actually have, believe it or not, some insightful commentaries that more mature viewers can appreciate and relate to. One noteworthy thing about SpongeBob, and something that has actually garnered a bit of controversy from more conservative parents in the past, is the show's inclusion of non-traditional families. Mr. Krabs is a single father with a spoiled teenage whale as his daughter. The identity of his ex-wife is never revealed and has been subject to much fan speculation. Plankton is married to a computer. And while I personally didn't read it that way, there are some adult fans who have interrupted the relationship between SpongeBob and his best friend Patrick. You wrote interrupted, but maybe you meant who have inferred or to be homoerotic. Indeed, there's an episode where the two adopt an orphan baby clam and essentially become an interracial same-sex couple for the entirety of the story. At one point, while going out on a morning stroll with their baby, they pass by a heterosexual fish couple who are bewildered by how a sponge and a starfish can have a clam as their child. I've never seen SpongeBob SquarePants. The episode concludes with a rather, for a kid's show, risque line where, after having successfully raised the clam to adulthood and seen them off, Patrick turns to SpongeBob and says, "Let's have another," garnering an alarmed look from the latter. Even though I strongly doubt that that was the original intent of the creators, this story can easily be viewed as a reflection of our changing society where non-traditional family units are becoming increasingly more visible. Another SpongeBob episode that stood out to me involved a storyline when our favorite porous hero decides to try his hand at stand-up comedy. During his routine, he starts making racial jokes mocking squirrels, which were well received by the underwater denizens, but were also genuinely hurtful to his friend Sandy, who, as you may remember, is a squirrel. She takes him to task on the matter, and after some brutal cartoon violence, SpongeBob eventually comes to realize the error of his ways. When he performs his comedy routine again, instead of targeting squirrels, he pokes fun at himself and every other species that was in the audience. And in the end, everyone was able to laugh at themselves and be in on the joke. When we look at our own current culture and comedy landscape, this episode appears highly relevant as it accurately illustrates the difference between singling someone out and making jokes at their expense, and being able to have everyone come together as a community and find humor in all of our crazy and ridiculous cultures. I will conclude with a final episode of SpongeBob that still brings me joy to this day. The story involves SpongeBob eating a bunch of strong-smelling foods that, unbeknownst to him, causes him to develop bad breath. Every person he subsequently encounters is repulsed by the stench and flees from him. Bewildered, SpongeBob asks Patrick what is wrong with him. However, Patrick does not have a nose and is thus also oblivious to SpongeBob's foul odor. Instead, he suggests that people were running away from SpongeBob because he's too ugly. SpongeBob becomes despondent over the notion and shuts himself off from society. To help his friend overcome his insecurity, Patrick takes him up to the roof of his house and has him loudly declare, "I'm ugly and I'm proud," as a method of empowerment. Once again, this line can be interpreted as a stand-in for other social issues. Indeed, Squidward, who overheard SpongeBob shouting, sarcastically remarks, "Is that what he calls it?" I do like to take it at face value, however. As someone who has always considered herself as being below average in the looks department, SpongeBob has given me one of my favorite slogans to recite whenever I needed a boost in confidence. "I'm ugly and I'm proud. Best regards, Willow." Willow, what a great letter. The funny thing is how can you hear your opinion and not be in love with you? I don't know. I don't understand. But what a great letter. You make me want to watch. Now I'm going to have to go binge watch all of SpongeBob SquarePants. I didn't see the movie. I've never seen an episode of the show. I probably need to rectify all of that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, It's a 2-hour show. I'm bringing an end to this episode of Robservations, number 283. 2? I forget. What? It's amazing. Of Robservations, the show about something. Once again, I'm your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. By the way, follow me on Twitter at BurnettRM. Follow me on Instagram. I post pictures of the dogs. I'm RM Burnett on Instagram. Go to the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page. Join up. We have over 800 members. Post stuff. And go to the website, theburnettwork.net. If you comment on anything there, you get entered into a random drawing to win a bottle of Lucky Tiger all over, head to tail body wash. Who doesn't want that? And if you like these chats, hit like, hit subscribe, all of those things. And that would be much appreciated. Help the channel grow. Help this community get bigger. I want to thank my moderators. I want to thank Louis Yu, and I want to thank Jordy Lyons, the new moderators. I want to thank Greg Smith, of course, Detective Jim, keeping you all honest, and the Honorable Mayor Mike Bodden, still a moderator, still here, the Grand Poobah, also the webmaster extraordinaire. And I want to thank everybody who works for this channel because I pay them so much money. I don't, actually, but one day I will. And we'll get bigger. And I'm getting close to that 300th episode where I am going to be moving. I don't think my 300th episode is going to be Saturday the 7th. It's probably going to be Saturday the 14th now, but it is going to be a 300-minute show. I will be in the new set, my Imaginarium. It'll be a very different show. I'm going to have guests. I mean, it'll still be me, but the production value is going to go way up. You'll hear a theme song every day. It's going to be big. It's going to be big. And again, thanks for all the generous support for the channel. It's great to have all you here. It's great to have a Thanksgiving week. I'm going to be here all week. I don't know about you, but I'll be here all week, ladies and gentlemen, even on Black Friday. So there you go. But that brings me to the end of this episode of Robservations. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, as you all know, have a better day.